Jack Blackwell squinted against the relentless Wyoming sun as he guided his cattle through Dry Creek's dusty main street. The animals moved sluggishly, ribs visible beneath their hides after weeks of drought. 3 dead already this morning. If he couldn't find water and a buyer soon, he'd lose everything. Townsfolk scattered as he approached, mothers pulling children aside, men eyeing him with open hostility. Jack Blackwell's reputation rode ahead of him like a shadow. Wealthy, ruthless, alone, just the way he preferred it. He tethered his horse outside the mercantile, boots heavy on the weathered boards as he ducked through the doorway. Inside, a woman stretched precariously on tiptoes, struggling to reach canned goods on a high shelf. Unlike the local women in faded calico, she wore a simple but well-tailored dress, hair pinned in an Eastern style gone slightly loose in the heat. Jack reached past her, easily retrieving the can. "Ma'am?" She startled, turning to reveal a face that stopped him cold, refined features, intelligent eyes showing exhaustion but no defeat. A woman fighting to maintain dignity amid obvious hardship. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell." Jack Blackwell. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Mrs. Catherine Thorne," she replied coolly. As other customers exited, Jack assessed the near-empty shelves, the carefully mended counter display, a widow's store on the edge of failure, just like his ranch. "You're new to Dry Creek." 5 months. Her chin lifted slightly. "Since my husband's passing." Something reckless stirred in Jack, a mixture of desperation and sudden, unwelcome desire. He stepped closer, voice dropping. "I'd trade 10 herds for one night inside you." The slap echoed through the empty store, sharp as a pistol crack. Jack didn't flinch, didn't raise a hand to his stinging cheek. Catherine Thorne's eyes blazed with outrage, but beneath it, something else, recognition of the same desperation mirrored in her own circumstances. "Get out." Jack nodded, touched his hat brim, and left without another word. That evening, thunder rumbled across the prairie as Jack made camp outside town. The first drops hit like bullets as the sky opened. His weakened cattle, desperate for water, spooked at the lightning, breaking through the makeshift corral. "Head 'em off," Jack shouted to his men as the herd stampeded toward town, directly toward the mercantile. Jack spurred his horse forward, cutting between the cattle and the buildings. He shouted and fired his pistol skyward, turning the leaders. As the herd began to veer away, a steer crashed into his mount, sending Jack tumbling beneath flying hooves. White-hot pain exploded through his chest and leg before darkness claimed him. He woke to the feel of hands on his body and the scent of lavender. Catherine Thorne leaned over him, candlelight highlighting her frown of concentration as she bandaged his bleeding leg. "Why?" he managed. Her eyes met his, cool and assessing. "Even you don't deserve to die in the street, Mr. Blackwell." Jack tried to rise, falling back with a groan. "Lie still," she ordered. "You've made your bed in my storeroom tonight. We'll discuss your crude proposition when you're conscious enough to regret it." Catherine wrung the cloth in cool water before placing it on Jack Blackwell's forehead. 3 days of fever had followed his injuries. Broken ribs, deep gash in his thigh, possible concussion. The town doctor had come once, shrugged, and said, "Keep him comfortable until he passes or recovers." Outside, rain continued to fall, a blessing for the parched land, but useless to the rancher fighting for his life on her storeroom cot. In his delirium, Jack called for someone named Sarah, voice breaking with anguish. "The storm should have been there. Forgive me." Catherine found herself wondering about the man beneath the ruthless reputation as she changed his bandages. His hands, though calloused, had been gentle when helping her reach that can, before making that unforgivable proposition. "Sarah," he whispered, "I'm late. The baby." Mrs. Porter from the boarding house appeared at the back door with a covered dish. "Thought you might need supper. What with your patient?" Her emphasis carried clear disapproval. "Thank you," Catherine said stiffly. "You know this isn't proper. A widow alone with a man like that. They say he's ruined 3 families with his business dealings. Would you prefer I left him to die in the street?" Mrs. Porter sniffed. "Banker Pomeroy was asking about you this morning. Very concerned about your situation." After the woman left, Catherine checked her ledger again. The bank's latest notice had arrived yesterday. Her debt had been sold to an unnamed buyer demanding immediate payment. Thomas had left her nothing but debt and a failing business in this dusty, judgmental town. The fever broke that night. Catherine woke to find Jack's eyes open, clear and watching her from across the small room. "Why are you helping me?" His voice was rough but lucid. "Christian charity," she replied, approaching with water. "Didn't know charity included housing men who proposition widows. Perhaps I'm hoping for divine intervention regarding your manners." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before he winced, shifting his injured leg. By morning, Catherine found him attempting to stand, leaning heavily against the wall. "You'll reopen your wounds," she warned. "Can't impose on you further." His breathing was labored, face pale with pain. Rain dripped through a corner of her ceiling. Jack followed her gaze. "Your roof's compromised." That afternoon, despite her protests, he climbed onto her roof, favoring his injured leg, and repaired the leak. Catherine watched from below, conflicted by this act of reciprocity from a man whose first words to her had been so offensive. Later, she found him examining the notice from the bank. "Your husband left you in debt?" "That's not your concern," she said, snatching the paper away. Jack nodded, gathering his few belongings. "Thank you for your care, Mrs. Thorne." Before leaving, he paused at her store entrance, where the sign hung by one hinge. Without a word, he found tools and fixed it properly. Catherine watched him limp away toward his camp outside town, wondering why such a simple act of kindness from such a complicated man left her feeling so unsettled. Catherine arranged jars of preserves in her front window when Silas Pomeroy strode into the mercantile, the sheriff trailing behind him like an obedient hound. The banker's expensive suit and watch chain glinted in the morning light, out of place in a town struggling through drought. "Mrs. Thorne?" Pomeroy's smile never reached his eyes. "I have unfortunate business to discuss." Sheriff Davis shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Silas, documents have come to light," Pomeroy continued, "indicating your late husband embezzled funds from the bank before his untimely passing." Catherine's hands tightened on the jar she held. "That's a lie. Nevertheless, I must insist on immediate repayment or press charges posthumously, which would implicate you as beneficiary of stolen funds." The implication hung in the air, as did the unspoken alternative. Pomeroy had proposed marriage twice since Thomas's death. However, his voice softened with practiced concern. "I might be persuaded to resolve this quietly if you'd sell your property at a fair price, or reconsider my previous offer." The bell above the door jangled as Jack Blackwell entered. Catherine hadn't seen him in the week since he'd limped away from her storeroom. "Mrs. Thorne won't be selling," Jack said, producing papers from inside his coat. "I've already purchased her debt." Pomeroy's face darkened. Impossible. See for yourself. Legal transfer of mortgage. Properly notarized in Cheyenne. After the stunned banker and sheriff departed, Catherine rounded on Jack. What game are you playing? I don't recall selling my debt to you. No game. Jack's expression remained impassive. I recognized Pomeroy's tactics. He's trying to dam Cottonwood Creek to control water rights during the drought. And why would you care about my predicament? Jack met her gaze directly. I have a proposition. You've already made one, quite memorably. A different kind. Marriage of convenience. 1 year. Separate quarters. I get water rights to save my herd. You keep your store free from Pomeroy's machinations. After the drought, we dissolve the arrangement. Catherine stared. You can't be serious. Deadly serious. Pomeroy wants both our properties. Together, we stand a better chance. That afternoon, Catherine overheard Pomeroy in the street. Blackwell drove the Henderson family to ruin 3 years ago, bought their debt and squeezed them dry. Now he's doing the same to the widow. Before she could consider the wisdom of her actions, Catherine stepped forward. Mr. Blackwell forgave a substantial portion of my debt and offered fair terms on the remainder. He's shown more Christian charity than those who've merely offered empty condolences. Later, alone in her store, Catherine penned her conditions: separate living quarters, a written contract stipulating dissolution after 1 year, complete independence in running her business. Agreed, Jack said when she presented her terms, but we need to make this look legitimate enough to stand legal scrutiny. Why help me? Catherine finally asked. Jack's expression remained unreadable. Perhaps I'm seeking divine intervention regarding my reputation. A week after their arrangement, Jack arrived with a small cabin in pieces on a wagon. By nightfall, he'd assembled it behind Catherine's store, close enough to maintain appearances, far enough to preserve propriety. The town's watching, he said as they ate a simple supper on her back stoop. Separate but together should satisfy most gossips. The drought intensified. Water grew so scarce that Catherine kept the store open only 3 days weekly. Jack's remaining cattle grew thinner despite his increasingly desperate efforts to find grazing land. They developed an unexpected rhythm. Catherine organized his cattle records while Jack repaired neglected store fixtures. She measured flour into careful portions. He distributed them to struggling families who couldn't pay. Neither acknowledged how their separate skills had begun to complement each other. One evening, a violent dust storm drove them both inside the store. Windows rattled as wind howled through every crack, dust filtering through the tightest seals. Thomas didn't die of pneumonia, Catherine said suddenly, voice barely audible above the storm. He took his own life after losing everything in bad investments. I found him. The bank was calling in his loans the next day. Jack remained silent for so long Catherine thought he hadn't heard. Then, my wife and son died 7 years ago. Blizzard hit while I was away making a cattle deal. By the time I returned, his voice trailed off. People say I drove them to it with my ambition. Maybe they're right. Catherine studied his profile in the lamplight. Is that why you offered to buy me that first day? To feel something? I don't know, he admitted. It was cruel, inexcusable. The honesty between them felt more intimate than any physical touch. Days later, Jack discovered Pomeroy's men had constructed a dam upstream, diverting Cottonwood Creek away from both his ranch and the town. The same evening, Catherine found letters in Thomas's old desk proving Pomeroy had manipulated loan terms, charging interest rates that guaranteed default. He wants everyone's water, Jack said, studying her discovery. During a drought, It's more valuable than gold. Catherine looked up from the documents. What happens if we can't stop him? The town dies. My cattle die. Everything dies. That night, Jack brought wildflowers he'd found somehow surviving near the dry creek bed. Catherine accepted them without comment, but later mended his torn shirts, adding small embroidered patterns to the cuffs. Neither mentioned how their business arrangement had begun to feel like something else entirely. Catherine's hands trembled as she read the faded promissory note hidden in Thomas's ledger. Her husband had borrowed money from Jack Blackwell 3 years ago, a substantial sum. Never repaid. The signature was unmistakable. When Jack returned from checking his remaining cattle, she confronted him with the evidence. You knew who I was before you entered my store. Jack didn't deny it. Yes. Was this all about collecting your debt? This marriage? This arrangement? No. His voice remained steady. I forgave that debt years ago. Then why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me that first day? Would my explanation have made my proposition any less offensive? Catherine paced the small room. You bought my mortgage from the bank knowing I was the widow of a man who cheated you. I recognized your name only after I saw you, Jack said. The proposition was, I have no excuse. But the marriage offer was genuine. Protection against Pomeroy. Nothing more. I want you to leave, Catherine said quietly. Jack nodded once. I'll honor our agreement. The property remains yours. I'll continue to watch Pomeroy from a distance. For 3 days, Catherine ran the store alone, feeling strangely hollow. On the 4th morning, Sheriff Davis arrived with papers. Sorry, Mrs. Thorne, or whatever your name is now. Pomeroy's filed complaint that your marriage to Blackwell is fraudulent. I'm ordered to evict you by sundown. Catherine merely nodded, waiting until he left before retrieving Jack's rifle from beneath the counter. By sunset, 3 men approached her store. Through the window, Catherine spotted Pomeroy watching from across the street. She stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. That's far enough. The men hesitated, looking toward Pomeroy for instruction. As they advanced again, a shot cracked the air, splintering wood at their feet. Jack emerged from the shadows, his own rifle aimed. Next one won't miss, he called. The confrontation ended with the men retreating, but Catherine knew it was only temporary. When she and Jack were alone, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. You came back, she finally said. Never left. Been watching from the ridge. Catherine lowered the rifle. I don't know what's true anymore. This is true, Jack said simply. Pomeroy wants us destroyed. Together we might survive. That night, as they reinforced the store's windows, Catherine asked, What do you actually want from me? Jack? He set down his hammer, meeting her gaze directly. Nothing you don't choose to give. The admission hung between them until Catherine closed the distance, her hand finding his face in the lamplight. I don't need your herds, she whispered against his mouth. I just need your truth. The kiss that followed sealed a different kind of contract, one written not on paper, but on 2 lonely hearts, finding unexpected sanctuary in each other. Jack rode at dawn to the scattered ranches beyond Dry Creek, carrying evidence of Pomeroy's water theft. By midday, a dozen ranchers had gathered at Catherine's store, hardened men with families facing ruin. The dam blocks water that's rightfully ours, Jack explained, pointing to survey maps Catherine had found in Thomas's papers. Pomeroy's selling access to our own water back to us. Catherine moved among the men, offering coffee. I've written to Judge Harmon in Cheyenne. He was my father's colleague. If we can hold out until he arrives, we'll have legal recourse. That's assuming Pomeroy gives us time, Jack cautioned. They didn't have to wait long for an answer. That night, as Catherine closed the store, she noticed the strange smell first. Coal oil, sharp and unmistakable. Flames erupted suddenly from the back storeroom, cutting off her escape through the rear door. "Jack!" she screamed. But the roar of the fire drowned her voice. Smoke filled her lungs as she stumbled toward the front door, finding it mysteriously barred from outside. Through watering eyes, she glimpsed Pomeroy across the street, watching impassively as her livelihood burned. Glass shattered as Jack broke through a side window, his arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her through the narrow opening. They collapsed on the ground as the roof timbers began to crack. By morning, only smoldering ruins remained of the mercantile. Catherine stood among the ashes, face streaked with soot. "Everything's gone." Jack's hand found hers. Not everything. They had just reached Jack's cabin when riders appeared on the ridge. Pomeroy's men, at least 8, armed and moving toward the cattle pen where Jack's remaining herd was corralled. "They're not stopping with the store," Jack said grimly. Loading his rifle, Catherine took up position at one window while Jack covered another. The first shots came as the riders charged the corral, attempting to scatter the cattle. "They drive off the herd. We have nothing left to fight with," Jack said, firing methodically. Catherine had never shot at a man before, but found her hands steady as she aimed for horses' feet rather than riders, driving them back from different angles. For 20 minutes, they held the attackers at bay through coordinated fire. Then a bullet splintered the window frame, catching Jack in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Catherine scrambled to his side as blood soaked his shirt. His eyes found hers, pain evident in every line of his face. "I'd trade all I have for more time with you," he whispered. Instead of breaking down, Catherine tore strips from her petticoat for bandages, then took up both rifles, firing alternately from different windows to maintain the illusion of 2 defenders. When the territorial judge's wagon appeared on the road, flanked by federal marshals, Pomeroy's men scattered like leaves in the wind. Judge Harmon found Catherine kneeling beside Jack, still firing at retreating figures, her face a mask of determined fury. "Mrs. Thorne?" the judge asked, bewildered. "Blackwell?" she corrected, lowering the rifle. "Mrs. Blackwell." Summer faded into autumn as Catherine nursed Jack back to health in a room above the saloon, the only place willing to house them after the fire. His recovery was slow, complicated by infection, but Catherine refused to leave his side despite disapproving glances from townsfolk. "You could still annul the marriage," Jack said one evening as she changed his bandages. "Start fresh somewhere else." Catherine's hands stilled on his shoulder. "Is that what you want?" "I want whatever gives you the best chance." "Then you should know I've already declined Pomeroy's offer to drop charges in exchange for the water rights." Jack raised an eyebrow. "When did he make this offer?" "While you were unconscious." Apparently, even from a jail cell, he believes he can negotiate. The territorial court convicted Silas Pomeroy of arson, fraud, and attempted murder. His assets were seized, including the bank building. With the dam destroyed, water once again flowed through Cottonwood Creek, bringing life back to parched lands. Surprisingly, it was Mrs. Porter who suggested rebuilding the mercantile as a town effort. "We were wrong about you both," she admitted to Catherine. "This town needs people who stand for something." By the first snowfall, a new store stood on the old foundation, with living quarters above more spacious than Catherine's previous rooms. The grand reopening drew everyone from miles around. "There's something I need to show you," Jack said that evening after the last customers departed. In the new storeroom, he opened the strongbox where they kept their legal papers. From it, he withdrew their contract of dissolution, now tattered from being carried in his pocket during his recovery. "1 year has nearly passed," he said, handing her the document. "You're free to choose." Catherine took the contract, studying the signatures. Two strangers who had agreed to a business arrangement that had become something entirely different. Without a word, she tore the paper in half, then quarters, then confetti. Jack's eyes never left her face. "Are you certain?" In answer, Catherine took his hand and led him upstairs to their new home, a building that stood exactly halfway between her mercantile and the path to his ranch, just as they now stood between their old lives and something new they'd created together, outside. The first proper rain in months fell softly on the tin roof. Through the window, they could see green shoots already emerging from the once barren soil. "I'd trade all the security in Boston for one lifetime beside you," Catherine whispered against his mouth. Jack's arms tightened around her. "No trade necessary. Everything I have is already yours." As the rain continued to fall, bringing renewal to the thirsty land, two people who had begun as desperate strangers found in each other what no drought could ever take away, the kind of wealth that can never be measured in cattle or coin.